Today on The Detail, a tale of two gang towns. One where meth-dealing intruders were swiftly dispatched.
The Timaru District Council today confirmed it has bought a property long used as a gang pad and immediately demolished the building.
And another where the patched are still whānau, who will be extended the hand of friendship no matter what the outside narrative is.
I've been for a drive this afternoon down the road to where the majority of the Mongrel Mob are congregating, and it's a very family-orientated feel. I mean, there's a lot of gang members there in patches, don't get me wrong, but they're respectfully mourning for one of their own that's passed.
Kia ora, I'm Alexia Russell. Ōpōtiki in the North Island, Timaru in the South. Ōpōtiki, where, when I asked how the town was dealing with gangs, I was told in no uncertain terms I was asking the wrong question.
That's completely the wrong narrative. The kupu is, how do we support our gang whānau within towns, within cities? Because their dealing kōrero sounds very persecutive, very condemning.
And Timaru, where crowds gathered and cheered as diggers ripped into the rebels' HQ.
Oh yeah, look, there was about 100 odd people on the day, and they were loving it. And look, the amount of texts and emails and responses we've had from the community, and the joke is, you know, how can local government move so fast? And it was nice to be able to do something, really positive for our community.
That's Mayor Nigel Bowen, and we'll come back to his story soon. But as he says,
I think it's a model that can work elsewhere, but it won't suit every situation.
And Ōpōtiki is the town that's hit the news most recently, sparking dramatic headlines, opportunistic politicians, and biting commentary.
Police in Ōpōtiki say they're in control despite gang tensions in the Bay of Plenty town becoming political. Numerous gang members are there for the funeral of Mongrel Mob leader Stephen Taiatini. He was killed on Friday night and police are still hunting those responsible.
We've had up to 50 extra staff in Ōpōtiki the last few days, and tomorrow that's ramping up to 100.
It is utterly unacceptable. A town is shut down in New Zealand because a gang came to town. Unacceptable.
We've seen time and time again gang members taking over public spaces, public roads, abusing members of the public, assaulting members of the public.
The old Ōpōtiki Mayor David Moore, he's sick of reporters. Reporters were the ones who just... all those pictures you saw of the gangs, the smoke, the gunshots, the arrests, the closed highways, that was a figment of your imagination. That was on the media. They got that completely wrong. It's become a political football, he says, old David Moore.
Yes, well, Mayor David Moore wouldn't speak to me either for this podcast. As Mike Hosking says, he's sick of reporters. But the council works closely with local iwi Te Whakatohea. And Trust Board member Tekahotu Maxwell was happy to kōrero about whakapapa, manakitanga, and working with the Ōpōtiki District Council. And yes, those things are gang-related.
Since the death of Tiwana, our nephew, we've been working very closely with we form what we call the Runanga Nui. And all members of our community have a position on this unconstituted body that was needed because of urgency and safety. So the council, the mayor's been sitting on this Runanga Nui since the Sunday after Tiwana was killed. And so has the police, and so has experts and clinicians and technicians within our community with regard to mental health, with regard to providing social services to the old. We've had the Ministry of Education and principals sitting on this runanga because we all have skin in the game.
You're trying to all be on the same page when it comes to dealing with issues.
Well, we are not trying to, we are. We are all on the same page because we have, as I said, we have an invested interest in our town remaining standing up and not being burnt to the ground. And our people that live here not becoming corpses in a cemetery. So, and the mayor is also whakatoa who's Māori, so he has real skin in the game.
Joining our conversation was Wāta Heathcote, who works with gangs across the wider region. He's a navigator, a mediator. His work is about keeping whānau safe.
When you're talking about whānau connected to the gang space. I actually take it one step back from there, and what actually connects us is whakapapa. What connects us is whānau first and foremost before they lead down that track of becoming a gang member. But I suppose what we've actually got to realise in terms of what we're facing, all they're wanting, our whānau, is to have a sense of belonging to something. And what's coming across in the media and political sector is a view from the outside, not actually understanding what's going on in the inside. And so I'm pretty clear when it comes to whānau in this particular space, we must give them that opportunity to also be the voice for who they are within their communities in a pro-social and equal way.
So rather than sort of condemnation from on high, acknowledging them as part of the community.
Absolutely. That's actually what they want to be a part of.
And how does this go hand in hand with, you don't earn a patch by helping old ladies across the road? How does that go hand in hand with some of the more unsavoury aspects that gangs are renowned for?
Yeah, again, when we talk unsavoury, that depends on perspective and assumption. The nefarious acts that happen within that particular space, it's very, very easy to tarnish those that are within the gangs with the same brush. But I'm telling you, as a person that works with these people across multiple sector, is that they are not all the same. What I will share is that 80% of our whānau are looking for change. They're looking for somewhere to reach out to for help. The 20% that continue to sit on the hill or continue to sit in the darkness will come, to the attention of the authorities. And that's exactly what needs to happen. What I'm saying is that there are actually 80% that are looking for change, that are reaching out for help. We've got that opportunity to do that collectively.
While remaining within the setting of their gang families, because they as you said, they need that sense of belonging.
Absolutely. Sense of belonging. Their sense of belonging might look different to the normal Joe blog in the community in terms of sense of belonging. But what we need to understand, and what society needs to understand, is that these people have been deprived and continue to be deprived.
The Mayor's understanding of that situation and his refusal to act the outraged civic leader was a trigger for politicians and commentators.
The person that's deceased is one of our locals, so there's whānau that are grieving. They don't know who's done this, so they're obviously a little bit angry and hoping that police sort of come, find out who's done this and resolve it as quick as possible. So there is some heightened concern in the community. There is a gang aspect to this. But they are members of our community, so I've been working the last 2 days with our local iwi and the local police, trying to approach this the best way we can as leaders from across the community to try and calm the situation and hopefully no further things happen.
But the local cops were singing from the same sheet.
We apologise for the disruption to the public, but it is what it is, and we'll be managing that so everyone is able to mourn respectfully, and the public, as much as we can, won't be overly inconvenienced.
I believe that the smaller the communities are, the more intimacy there is in terms of understanding. But when you're in a big wide scope in the bigger cities, it becomes a topic of discussion because of the lack of understanding. Don't get me wrong, I'm not here to support the behaviours of what has been seen. What I'm here sharing is that it's easy to get yourself caught up into a lot of bravado that can be seen and then becoming a part of that. But as I'm saying is that it's not, what you're seeing doesn't actually portray what's actually going on in that particular space. And that needs to be the clear messaging that that I'm sharing with you today, as well as our rangatira here, Te Kahautu, is that let's not judge. It's easy to judge when you're on the outside. It's easy to judge when you're living a good life. It's easy to judge when you're a high income earner. It's easy to judge when, you don't have to live day by day. So it's about being able to understand the shoes and the complexities that these whānau sits in every second of the day and night, every second. What our whānau are reaching out for is that level of support. They're not all organised criminals, definitely not, and you're hearing that from a person that works with them, but it's a behavioural issue that we're navigating, and actually been a huge amount of change, to be honest, in our space, in terms of pro-social behaviours. The kōrero around methamphetamine, the authorities will continue to deal with those. But I tell you right now, not all gangsters are doing that.
Okay, let's turn now to some gangs who are doing that. We're talking about methamphetamine now, who are muscling in on the territory of traditional Kiwi gangs. Gangs that have stepped up, moved in and patched over their rivals, like on Nigel Bowen's territory, Timaru.
About a year ago, we had the headhunters come in and patch over an old gang, which was called the Road Knights. So Timaru historically has had two gangs, one being the Road Knights and the other being the Devil's Henchmen. And they're gangs that date back to the 70s. And so most of them are now, their retirement age. The ones that are left from the Devil's Henchmen, you would call themselves a motorcycle, club versus a gang. That's up for interpretation, of course. But the Road Knights that were patched over by the headhunters, a local businessman bought that land and trespassed them and said, you're gone. And so they actually moved on relatively easily.
This experience prompted the council to focus on another gang pad across 4 properties in Washdyke. It was a fortified Devil's Henchman club, which last month was forcibly taken over by the rebels.
We'd done some due diligence prior to that and we knew the risks. So when the opportunity presented itself, it was pitched over, I think, over one weekend. And the weekend after, we were looking at, hey, what are some of the levers we can pull? We knew that we could purchase, and if we were to purchase it, we needed to move quite quickly.
Timaru District Council has finished buying a series of former gang properties in Washdyke. Last month, the purchases of 4 Meadows Road properties, valued at more than $2 million, was unanimously ratified by the council. Mayor Nigel Bowen says it was important to buy the whole package of properties, so there was no place for a new gang to set up shop. He says the council is planning to clear the sites before putting them up for sale as soon as possible. All costs from the transaction and sale of the land are expected to be recovered.
So we'd done some of those sort of due diligence things behind the scenes, which meant when we could and did purchase, that we could move quite quickly and, demolish the building at the same time. There was about 100 odd people on the day, and they were loving it. And the amount of texts and emails and responses we've had from the community, and the joke is, how can local government move so fast? And it was nice to be able to do something, really positive for our community. And we knew that the risk, if we didn't move quickly, was that this new gang, the rebels, would get entrenched in our community. We've heard, from police and others, had they been entrenched, you'd see, methamphetamine use skyrocket. And we knew that if we left it too long, that they would, probably force the owners to sign over the properties.
So this was an opportune moment because of the takeover that you were able to wedge yourself in there. If the Devil's Henchmen who'd been there for a while, if they'd just stayed there, if that hadn't happened, would you have tried to get rid of them too, or were they a sort of benign presence?
Yeah, look, very much so. They were a presence back in the 80s, but not now. They weren't, high risk to the community. They're not of the level that you're seeing things, happen across the country at the moment. So we knew that the rebels were a whole nother level. And we talk about gangs, but realistically, these are, organised criminals. There's a pyramid, and they need to, sell drugs to send the money to wherever it needs to go. So if they were entrenched, it was just a whole another level of gang activity that we certainly weren't used to, haven't seen in our community for a long time.
So say, going back 30 years, say, how would you have described Timaru in relation to gangs? Was it gang-free? Has it always been a gang town?
Well, there's a bit of a hangover probably from the 80s in the fact that there was two gangs, as I said, described the Devil's Henchmen and the Road Knights, and there was some activity in the 80s and early 90s, and some across the country would still say, that they remember those days, but we haven't had any issues for, decades. But the difference between those gangs, they were all local, people. The local area commander that recently retired, he said, these guys are all my age. They should be at home with their slippers on, sort of scenario. But the ones that were coming in, they're not local people. They weren't coming. I say to people, hey, they're not coming here to, build playgrounds. They're coming here for one reason, and that's to sell methamphetamine to our people. And unfortunately, because where we are, we're the centre of the South Island, it's a great place to do business, but it's probably also a great location to be able to move drugs around. There's Queenstown Market, which is relatively close. You've got Christchurch up the road. We've got a port where there's a lot of containers coming in. We've got an easy airport that there's no drug dogs and things like that as well in the domestic setting. So it's an easy place to bring drugs into.
So, Nigel, how did you get the whole council behind you, not just to move so quickly, but to decide that this was your bailiwick? I mean, a lot of people would say, we can't do anything about it. They have the property. It's the police's job, etc.
Yeah, look, I've always been of the view, and I think it's a bit of a cop out. A lot of people will say, hey, it's the police's problem, and if we all took that attitude, then we're never going to get anywhere. And I view this response as what I call an all of community response. And council, we decided we could take a role, and we're lucky that all the elected members were very much on the same page in this response. And police are running parallel, and they were doing their operation as well because they had concerns. And then community supported as well. We had businesses on the day really bend over backwards to do asbestos checking, to turn the water off, turn the power off, to get in with the digger and knock it over. And we did that really quickly because we were concerned that, hey, had the building still been there, that these guys would have came back, and we had all indications that they would.
Mm. So I guess we're looking at a community that's got together, as you say, to excise an outside influence. Had that gang pad still been in the hands of the locals, would there have been the motivation to do so much about it?
No, not at all. I mean, our indications, and we'd worked closely with police on this, and they had said, they're just a gang that you don't want. It's just a whole nother level of crime that a community like ours is just not used to. If we can act now, and I've got to say, all credit to police, they did a great job as well. And, if you can act now and keep them out, then that's the opportunity. I mean, I'm quite real to the fact that, hey, there's still going to, we're still a market, and, where there's a market, these gangs will try and come back. But, at least we're sending a strong message, and hopefully we'll get support of police and government to keep them out.
Since you've made this bold move, what's been the reaction of your peers, other mayors from around the place?
Oh, look, only support. I haven't heard any negative comment. Our community's, fully supportive. And I think, we don't, it's not something within local government, it's not necessarily with our mandate, and it's not something we think of every day. But if you look at the community harm and some of the groups I'm involved with, you've got babies coming through the education system now. I talked to a family over the Christmas period that I know really well, and they've had a 30-year-old that cannot get meth out of his system, and it's just pulled their family to bits. And understanding that harm that methamphetamine can do to your community, even if you're not seeing gangs on the streets as you are in other regions across the country, the level of harm that they're causing is still there. And so, as a community locally and as a community and, wider community across the country, we all need to do our part to keep them out. There's an opportunity, especially with the proliferation that you're seeing up north. We don't want that to come south. And so, what can we all do to work together to keep these people out? And I get frustrated when people talk about these, gangs. They're part of our community. They're whānau, their family, and all those sorts of things. Well, my response to that is actually take your patch off and be a part of the community. Get a job. As soon as you can prove to me, and I would put the onus on them, if you can prove to me that you're not dealing in methamphetamine that is just ruining our communities, then I'll give you a chance. But until you can prove that, I'm sorry, I have a zero tolerance for gangs.
Not every single gangster deals methamphetamine.
Sure.
Not every single gangster is a part of an organised criminal group. The kupu 501s is not our kupu. The kupu gang is not our kupu either. They are our whānau.
Sure.
However, what we need to be able to understand and separate is that there'll be a group of those that will continue to do what they do in our communities, but there is a group, and a large group of whānau within this space that are looking and reaching out for change. We'll just continue to help those that want to be helped.
Sure.
We can't help those that are not ready. I can't, and I will never ever tolerate any form of drug being pushed into our communities.
Sure.
Nor will I align myself to that crap. There's a group that won't call it all, nor will they come into the circle to talk about transformation,
Sure.
because they're not ready for it. What we can do is help those that are ready for that change. And I tell you right now, it's like a tsunami.
So, two towns and two very different stories. But one thing both agree on is that social investment is the key to solving these issues.
We are dealing with 4 generations of gang. These children are born into it. They are conceived into it. The issue is not the gang. The issue is the behaviour. And we all have a duty of care and responsibility to miri that process to ensure that we can encourage good positive behaviour rather than some of the behaviours that society may see as abnormal or intimidating. So there's a lot of work going on in that space, but just remember, these are people that have been left to the edge of society where no one's actually really cared for them.
Look, I'm quite real. It's not just being tough on crime, and obviously we're in election year, so there's a lot of conversations happening in this place. But until we get the mix right, where we have that social investment, investment in education. I was having a conversation earlier today whereby the literacy numbers within gang associates and gang members, a lot of these people can't read and write. It's the basics. So there's a lot of work to be done. And look, I don't want to be shifting the problem from one community to another at all. But I'm invested in a solution.
That's it for today. I'm Alexia Russell. The Detail is supported by the Public Interest Journalism Fund. Today's episode was engineered by William Saunders. Our producers are Sarah Robson and Bonnie Harrison. Thanks to Tika Hautu Maxwell, Wa'ata Heathcote and Nigel Bowen. Ka kite anō.